I'm Chris Gardner of the Houston Round Ball Review, and speaking with me today, she's a busy woman, Miss Patti Smith. And as you see on the screen there, the tag, you're with Relevant Worldwide. First, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Thank you for doing this. We're going to work. Now let's work backwards.
Okay.
Um, we'll get to Relevant Worldwide toward the end because that's the newest and latest and greatest project that you are a part of. For those who are part of sports, live in Houston, they've known you for a while. But for those who aren't from Houston, know Houston, let them know about Patti Smith.
Oh, wow. That's a broad question. Well, from a Houston sports standpoint, I started here in Houston back in 1995 with Fox Sports. Actually, then it was PrimeSports, but I was with Fox Sports Southwest for about 21 years, both as a producer and on air. I started there as a producer and produced approximately 864 pregame shows for the Rockets, the Astros, the Mavericks, the Spurs, the Stars, all teams in Texas, alongside Kevin Eschenfelder. And then I went on air, I think, in around 2000, I don't know, early 2000s. I was sideline reporter for the Astros and the Rockets. I also did for a number of years, all the Texans shoulder programming on Fox. So I think it was about 5 shows a week, either with Mark Vandermeer, Bart Ennis. We did the weekly shows, the magazine shows, the in-stadium shows. So really the 3 major teams, hosted some shows for U of H and Rice and Texas A&M, anything that really Fox Sports needed. And then as well, I have been a rodeo Houston announcer for probably the past 15 years and still am. And so that's kind of the beginning days of my sports career here in Houston.
When you were growing up, were you an athlete or sports big in your life when you were younger?
Yep, all of the above. I was an athlete. We have a joke in my family. So I'm married to a high school football coach.
Mm-hmm.
I have a daughter who's was a D1 athlete, ran hurdles at Texas A&M, and but the joke is who's the best athlete in the family. And while they have the credentials, I still maintain that I'm the best athlete in the family. I grew up mostly playing softball. I was a shortstop for a number of years, and but played all sports. Had a couple of brothers who were hockey players, and so I definitely was surrounded by sports my entire life, and pretty much knew that this was the career path that I wanted to pursue.
Hockey. So where'd you grow up? Hockey.
That was my early years were in Minnesota.
Okay.
So my dad's Canadian, and so hockey. My brothers actually, live in Toronto. So hockey's big in my family. But yeah, growing up in Minnesota, it was a pretty big deal. And my dad used to take me out when I was probably 8 or 9 years old and line me up against the boards and just fire pucks at me as hard as I could. And my job was just to avoid them. So yeah, sports was always a big part of our life. And yeah, I was a complete tomboy and definitely an athlete.
When did the sports media bug, sports journalist bug hit you?
I was 11 years old. I remember the day like it
Wow.
was yesterday. I remember sitting on my stairs one day and thinking to myself, Howard Cosell's getting a little bit older. At some point, my goal is to replace Howard Cosell. That's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
So I was 11 years old.
That's interesting. Okay. Well, that kind of leads me to one of my questions. Did you, I guess, besides Howard Cosell, who did you look up to in sports media that you wanted to pattern yourself after?
I don't know that I really did, honestly. I mean, back in those days, that's just a saying that sounds like something my mother would say. Back in those days, but there weren't a lot of females in sports. I mean, there was Phyllis George, there was Jane Kennedy. There were a couple, but I never really looked at it that way. Honestly, I never thought of it as a female. So let me pattern myself or whatever after that. I just liked what Howard Cosell did. I just liked the whole aspect of, look, being realistic. And even at that age, I think knowing that I was never going to grow up to be a professional athlete, what better way to kind of partake in it than to be like that. When I was a kid, I used to, and you're probably too young for this, but there was an era back in the 70s probably where it was kind of a popular thing, and I don't want to call it a song, but they would take, and the one I can think of was Mr. Jaws. There would be like an announcer, and he would say, "Mr. Jaws, what do you think of this?" and then they would play like a popular song as the answer, like Sweet Caroline or whatever. And I used to make those. I used to like produce those even as a kid.
Wow.
So I think that was kind of the start of knowing that that's sort of an industry that I wanted to be in. And I didn't really know exactly what it meant, but I just kind of knew I wanted to go that direction, but didn't really have anybody that I really patterned anything after.
Did you have to, or do you still have to, from your work back at Prime Sports, now Fox Sports, show folks that you know sports, you do know what you're talking about?
I don't know that I ever look at it as that I have to show them. I mean, I think in any job or any profession or anything that you do, you have to, whatever means it takes to get the job, whether it's, because you know somebody or whether because it's how you look or whether it's whatever it is, um, you have to back it up. You have to prove yourself. And a lot of it just becomes about, um, I don't know, gaining the trust and gaining the respect either of the people that you're working with or the industry that you're in. So I don't think I ever felt like I had to prove it, but I think anytime you're doing something, you've got to back it up.
Do you have a favorite sports moment? Just
Oh,
one out of all of everything you've been a part of?
I have a lot of them. I'll give you two that stand out to me because my first favorite moment probably was I started my career actually before Houston. I was in Atlanta and I was just kind of getting started. And that was in the early 90s when the Braves were just, really starting to win, um, really go on their long run back with Maddox and Glavine and all in those days. And it was game 6, I believe. I might be wrong. It might have been 7, but I think it was game 6 of the NLCS. Is just being at that game. It was the first time I'd really ever experienced that kind of having I don't know, some relationships with the players and the teams and being a part of it. But when they beat Pittsburgh in that NLCS and just the celebration with Sid Bream and, chugging
I
around
remember that.
third
Yeah.
base. Yeah, that particular moment was probably one of the highlights just from a celebration standpoint. And then fast forward, probably my most, I don't know, really cool moment when people ask me this question that I tell, it would be with the Astros. When I was doing sideline for the Astros, every opening day, I would always do an interview with President George Bush. And as he got a little bit older, he kind of stopped doing the interviews with people because he just didn't quite know what he was going to say. And he was just getting a little bit older, but he would still always do that opening day interview with me. And so we were doing the interview. It was later in the game, and Barbara actually had left. So I went and sat right behind home plate in her seat with President Bush. And we were waiting to do the interview, and he was just asking me about my family and my kids, and we were just talking. And then we did the interview, and the producer, after we were done, the producer's in my ear, and he says, "Hey, I need you to go do something with the astronauts. Where are you?" And I in the microphone and my earpiece, I said, I'm still sitting here with President Bush. And President Bush grabbed the microphone and he says to the producer, "She's here with me. She's not going anywhere. In fact, she needs 2 weeks off." And the producer's like, "Was that really him?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it really was." And he says, "Feel free to stay however you'd like." Well, right after that, it was time for the 7th inning stretch, and Jack Ingram came out to perform. And I helped him stand up because he was well into his 80s, helped him stand up. And we stood there together, and he held my hand while Jack Ingram was singing God Bless America. So that was probably one of the cool. And I remember thinking at that time, someday I'll probably tell my grandkids about this. That was a pretty cool moment.
That is very cool. Very cool. Wow. Okay. In front of the camera, behind the camera, you have a favorite part of it? What do you prefer more?
Oh, good question. Um, Behind the camera, I think is where you're allowed, or I felt like I was allowed to be more creative and be a storyteller. And I think that's where I think I built my career on telling stories, whether it's in front of the camera, behind the camera, post TV days. I think most of my career is about being able to tell a story. So I like the ability to do that. And I think having that experience behind the camera helped me be better on camera because you realize what it takes to be good on air. You don't want to you're not just a pretty face. You're not just giving stats. You're not just giving facts. My job was always to as a sideline reporter for the most part, was to find a good story and to be able to tell a story. So I think that being behind the camera helped me with that. I think there's pros and cons to both. I think you can be more creative behind the camera. I think there's a bigger rush from being in front of the camera. So I like them both for different reasons. I like the fact that I was able to do both for so many years. I didn't really have to just pick one or the other, that I could be creative and do both.
How did you get involved with the sports authority?
So that relationship would go back to probably 2014, maybe, when I was still with Fox. I hosted the Lombardi Awards for a couple of years, maybe, I don't know how long, but that was one of the shows that I would host. And so I got to know the people at the Sports Authority. And we had talked, Janice Burke and I had talked for years. Well, I shouldn't say we talked for years. She had approached us one time, us, I say Fox, about doing um, a sports awards thing of
Mhm.
some sort. And I, in turn, before that, had already talked to the people at Fox and thought, wouldn't this be cool to do a Texas, kind of have our own award show here? And they were like, oh yeah, that'd be a great idea, but that's not what we do. We do live, events, and it's just not going to happen. So when we were in a meeting one day with the Sports Authority talking about Lombardi Awards, when she brought it up, I was like, oh my gosh, it's a great idea, because I've had the same idea. Anyway, one thing led to another. Within a couple of years, Janice had said to me, look, I want to do this. Would you be willing to leave Fox and come over and help me start this? And one thing led to another, and I did. The timing was right. I left Fox, and the rest was kind of history. We started the Houston Sports Awards, and 6 years later, it's a great success.
And kudos to you for that. How did you get involved with the rodeo?
Again, that was one of the shows that we did every year. I did a show, like a cowboy preview show or a rodeo Houston preview show for the rodeo. Didn't, honestly, if I'm being totally candid, know anything about rodeo. Our producer would just write the stand-ups for me, and I'd go and I'd do the show. And they had a girl who did kind of the sideline stuff like I do now, at the time, and she had some commitment, and she had a conflict one night, and this was back in 2011, maybe, I don't remember when. And they called me and they said, hey, would you fill in for her on this one night? She can't do it. And I said, I'd be happy to help you, but I don't know anything about rodeo. I just don't, but I'll do it.
Mhm.
And they said, no problem, just treat it like you would any sideline, treat it as a sport, treat the Cowboys as athletes, just do it. And I did it, and they loved it. They never brought her back. So, message to all people at their jobs: don't let anybody else do your job, or you might not get it back. But we sort of just kind of took it from being kind of and no disrespect to anyone else, but kind of the cutesy cowgirl sideline person, to actually treating these athletes like what they are, and that's athletes, and kind of taking it up a notch. And so now I do understand rodeo. Now I do know who the participants are and the athletes are, and yeah, I've been going ever since. I love it.
I believe you work with or did work with Andre Ware, Warren Moon, and VY on something. Just provide more details on that.
Yeah, that's Brothers in Arms, and that's something we started back in, I believe, maybe 2019. Andre is one of my best friends, and we were having lunch one day, and he was doing Texans TV while I was doing Texans radio, and he always would talk about wanting to do something back in the community, ways to give back, and we just never really kind of honed in on it. And one day we were having lunch, and I don't know, we came up with the whole concept for him. He and Warren Moon had a relationship back in the day, and maybe there's a way to do something with the two quarterbacks. And one thing led to another, and we brought Vince Young in. You got three African American quarterbacks, all legends here in Houston. All kind of the first at what they did. Andre was
Mhm.
the first Black quarterback to win the Heisman Trophy. Warren was the first Black quarterback to go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Vince probably has done a lot of first things, but he was one of the
Mhm.
greatest high school and college quarterbacks ever to come out of Houston. So all three of them, ironically, were all also raised by single moms. So we thought, why don't we do something? And we came up with the name Brothers in Arms. Thought it was the perfect name for it. And we've raised money now for 5-6 years for kids who are high school seniors that also participate in a sport and are also raised in a single family environment. We have them write us an essay on diversity. We don't care what color they are, but diversity affects everybody. What does it mean to you and how has it impacted your life? And we offer scholarships to those kids based on that criteria. It's been probably one of the most amazing and rewarding things I've ever been a part of.
Excellent, excellent. Relevant Worldwide.
Yes, look, I'll
What
show you my sign. Look at my sign. There
I
you go.
see it. Nice
Okay.
graphic. What is it? What is it about? Why did you
Rele-
get started in it and all that good stuff?
Relevant Worldwide is basically relevant is relationships and events. And kind of as I've alluded to in this interview so far, I think everything career wise for me has been about relationships. And I wanted to kind of take those relationships and obviously at the Sports Authority, doing events and really kind of understanding how events run. I've got a partner, Holly Kesterson, who was the president of the Final Four. She was also at the Sports Authority with me. We kind of have partnered up and we want to utilize our relationships and our experience that we have in running events. And it's a marketing firm. We have some athletes that we represent and do some things. Justin Reed, for example, is a client of ours, and we run all his foundation events, both in Kansas City and here in Houston. We've got some corporate clients that we put on events for their companies, and we've got some clients that we just do their marketing. East River 9 is one of our clients, so we bring events out to there, help them market East River 9. So it's kind of a combination of those three things, but it really boils down to relationships and events.
Cool. Please tell Holly I said hello, and don't be a stranger, Holly. Now, what's next?
Watch this. Hey.
That was cool.
That was pretty cool.
Thank you very much for that. What's next for you? What's next for Relevant Worldwide?
That's a good question. I mentioned some of the clients that we have and some of the things we do, but we've got 2 or 3 really big projects that they're events that we want to create. And the whole purpose of this was not just to, I don't know how to word this, not work for ourselves, but really to work on things that mean something to us and that can leave an impact that is important to us. So we've got a couple of big events, and I won't go into too much detail yet, but that we want to own, for lack of a better word, produce, start, that I think could be really impactful for the community, important to us. So those are a couple of things that we see out on the horizon. In the meantime, we're just, hitting the ground running and trying to bring in new clients and try to do some great things for some other great companies and corporations and brands.
Do you have any advice for anyone who wants to follow your career path?
Which part of my career path?
Pick a part.
Well, I'll tell you, I give advice every day to my daughter who's trying to follow in that career path. Kennedy Smith is her name, and some of your viewers and listeners may have already seen or know her out there. She does the in-game entertainment for the Roughnecks. She does some high school sidelines for Space City Home Network on their game of the week. She's got a huge social media following, so she's a big influencer, but she ran track at Texas A&M, as I mentioned. And so I'm giving her advice every day. And I think it's kind of what we've sort of talked about. To me, it's all about relationships again. You can be great on air. You can be not great on air. Whatever you want to do, it's going to probably come down to not just who you know, but your relationship with people, how you treat people, how you get from point A to point B is going to take other people. So I can't stress enough, whether it's in storytelling, whether it's in trying to get a job, whether it's in talking to students at the high school level, the college level, whatever it is. After my first thing that I'll spit out of my mouth to my kids every day is make good decisions as they're walking out the door. It's also to make sure to nurture the relationships in your life, whether they're personal or professional. That's probably the best piece of advice I could ever give, is to focus on those relationships, but also to separate yourself from everybody else, especially if you're in this industry. You could look at, ESPN and their sideline reporters or whatever, and they do amazing jobs, but you don't just want to do what they do or be like them. You need to be who you are. You need to separate yourself. You need to be different because, when you're on a stack of applications or a stack of tapes on somebody's desk, you can have all the talent in the world, but what makes you different? So the other piece of advice would be to separate yourself somehow from the pack, and you have to figure out how to do that. What are your talents? What are you best at that can separate you?
Excellent. Thank you, Miss Patti Smith. That's all I need. You were great, as I really thought you would be. Is there anything you want to add? If I forgot to bring up that you want to touch on? And I do want to mention this. When you have more details about you and Holly's upcoming events plans, please keep me in mind. And if you want to come on and discuss those, feel free to do so.
Yeah, no, we definitely will. We're not far away from kind of launching those things, so I definitely will. No, I think you covered it all. You made it easy, and we're happy, either one of us, happy to come on anytime.
Thank you very much, Patti. You take care.
Okay, thanks, Chris. You too.
Bye bye.